Go.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of Hit Confirm. I am Casey, one part of this combo of this host, and my other friend, class slash host partner, is here, Coach, to help.
Hey, what up, everybody?
Sorry for the sniffles there in the beginning. I'm kind of like, usually I don't have the allergies to get to me, but sometimes like they do. So yeah,
What you allergic to, man? Top tier characters?
allergic to all the BS and no, I'm messing. It's just I don't know. The pollen has been very weird for me in the past couple years. Because before I wasn't as allergic, but now I don't know. It's beginning to me.
Getting old, man.
Maybe that's it.
You getting old.
I turned 30 this year. Oops.
Uh-oh. That means you about to get mad about fighting games. You got to be that guy in the corner playing Mark of the Wolves. And then some kid's gonna
Yeah.
come by and say, "What's that?" Ah, that's Terry from Smash Brothers. And then you gonna lose it.
I did say after DBFZ came out, this is gonna be like my old man game, where in terms of like once everything like big huge tournaments stop hosting it and like tours are done, I'm still gonna be in a corner playing DBFZ. Like, does anybody want to play?
Everyone's playing Tekken 9 and Street Fighter 7. That's what you gonna be over there in the corner. At least people know some of what your game's about, though. they won't know.
That is true.
They'll know what's going. They'll know who's in it and what's going on.
That is true. The casual people can just walk up and watch and understand everything that's going on. Whereas in like Guilty Gear, it's like, what's that green oval around the
Yeah.
gear?
Yeah, who are those, man? Are those the Blaze Blue extra extend characters? Is this
Oh,
some
I
kind of
know this
spin-off
blue
game?
this Blue Blazes game. Ah, this is pretty cool.
Oh man, I'm gonna use that as my segue. You say DBCs. That's the game you gonna live and die for. That's the game you're gonna take on as tournaments die down for it and whatnot. And like what I wanted to talk about is that game. The games that define you, the games that built you, and I like to call that, your fighting game DNA. Like where did you come from? Where are you going, and how does that affect everything you touch?
So so there's two. So do you talk about before, like when you're casual, or like starting competitively? Like,
I feel like it can start anywhere, right? Because like when you're casual, things that you might fall into are like the cool effects of a game, the aesthetic, and then that might affect how you view games. If it's a cool mechanic, if there's high damage that is easy to get, you as a casual can appreciate a lot of things that when you go competitive will still kind of stick to your soul.
yeah. So obviously, I would say for me personally, my first was Street Fighter Championship Edition on Sega. That's that's where I started off. So like that's where I got kind of a like. Now I didn't really understand footsies, but I understood the importance of like trying to throw a fireball. But I would say where I really started to like hunker down onto like developing my style in terms of like DNA would be it, mostly like the Capcom. So like Street Fighter 4 and Marvel 2. Cause like around 2008, that was when I first discovered uh, the fighting game community, and I was playing a lot of fighting games at the time. I was like messing around in Gear. I remember me and my friends had like a house tournament with the gold character, EX gold characters, and it was wild. But so I remember those games, but the games that like where I really like started developing my style was like Street Fighter 4 and Marvel 2, because Marvel 2 made me want to pick up a stick because I was like seeing Storm flying around everywhere, and I was like, what Justin Long is doing is so cool. Like he's controlling the pace of such a crazy game because he's in the air and his character can fly so high off screen to the point where it goes off screen so people can't even touch her. So that when I saw that, I was like, just having a game plan was like pretty cool to me because I never knew it can be that deep. And then he would win like then that's when I started hearing about like him winning and everything like that. So I was like, well, like that's pretty cool. Um, but I think it's pros and cons to it. Funny enough, because when you start something like that, you start to develop. And this kind of goes back to like when, from the original our first podcast when I talk about the fighting game constitution of like how you think fighting games should be played. So like that can like it can help you and hurt you because then like once somebody introduces something new to you after you've been playing for a good while, now you're gonna either accept it or not, and it can as simple as that is either can hurt you or help you because now you're like wow this game can be played this way, man. That's when it gets kind of like that's two sides to it, but I think having those two sides is what makes fighting games pretty cool, pretty unique.
And I guess I'd ask you like the kind of superficial question that's on my mind when you say all that. Like you say you got like when Marvel 2 and you saw just the one. That's when it like really a lot of sparks were going off in your mind. That's kind of what I gathered. So would you say like after that, like getting into that Street Fighter 4, would you say that like really painted how you see games, like what you like and dislike when you turn something on, or do you feel like it's been a pretty light bias?
I feel like I'm probably the worst person to ask for this question because for me, I when it comes to fighting games, I tend to like all of them. I don't play all of them because I feel like I'll get frustrated trying to play all of them. But I see the uniqueness in like in the genre. So I appreciate every single bit of it, even if it's something that's very wild or something that's from the footsies game to the stuff that you don't even understand because something wonky happened. Um, so for me, I think starting off the combination of playing like, uh, because funny enough, I used to try to play Budokai 3 competitively before like I even knew that FGC existed. So, and that's not like in FGC, that's not really considered a like real fighting game. So I guess that's where my like actual like come up comes from in terms of like thinking of how to approach a fighting game. I have everything open minded, and so when I see something, I'm like, oh, this is supposed to. I usually don't say this is supposed to work in for this game or that game. I usually ask, why doesn't that work? I don't try to force it
I guess in a
because
way, oh, go ahead.
oh no, that was it.
Oh, okay. So like, I guess when I'm like hearing you, like in your way, that's your DNA. Is like I've seen enough of these games. I played enough of them when I was getting started. Seen enough stuff where it's like I'm just interested. I want to see things. I want to know how it works. So like you could argue like your DNA is like more of a tinkerer. You like to pull it apart, see what it's like, and rather than just trying to replicate the experience you had from other games. Because I would say from my point of view, I guess when I started really competitively, I started with Street Fighter 4 as well. That's one my big game. But I like national stuff like CVS 2 and all that. But I'm one of those people who had the biases at first because I played a lot of Street Fighter 4, and I would dabble in other things. But that's really what defined how I looked at games at first. And it actually took people around me to change that. But like when I look at a game, in Street Fighter 4, like for example, it's straightforward to anti-air somebody. You're usually rewarded to some good degree. That's the way the game's built. So in my mind, I thought like, man, to have a good fighting game, it has to have like the solid anti-air. You can't just be jumping around like an idiot, right? And so that's the kind of bias I had when I went in the game. So it's like whenever I saw games where it's like people are jumping around doing this, oh man, that's just wild nonsense. Like it wasn't conscious, but it's more like subconscious in my mind. Like yeah, that's just people acting wild, just doing whatever they want. But like as I played more stuff, kind of like you, I had to kind of break that bias because I had to kind of ask myself, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And like you said, harkening back to the first episode where we talked about what makes a fighting game and what you sign up for. Um, that's kind of how you gotta take it sometimes because, or it's fine if you know what you want to. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you go into a game thinking this is the standard. Like, you can't be jumping around. You got anti-air, then you got a game like Arcana Heart where the game's based on jumping around movement. Anti-airs are purposely weak because they want you moving around in relation to your opponent. So it's a brand new concept. Or you play something like Marvel, where again movement and stuff is emphasized, and it's not quote unquote scrubby or wild. It's how you play the game. It's how you relate to and strategize versus your opponent, as opposed to a more grounded Street Fighter type game. So like I figure a lot of people kind of take those biases and like again they can work the other way around, right? You're a Marvel player, you're moving around, and then you play like something like Sam Show, and it's like, man, I want to air dash. I want to jump around, and then you got this guy that's DPing you out of the air. So like those kind of things you carry with you, and I feel like you talk about fighting game DNA. That's the obvious thing. What you learn to value, or what you think should be the standard of how things work. Risk reward should be this way. Anti-air should be this way. Combo damage should be this way. Cancel mechanics should be this way. This shouldn't be allowed to happen. This must happen, and so on and so forth. And I noticed that a lot of people sometimes not they don't even really think about it. They take that from game to game. And so when they get a game where, they're jumping around like nuts, but they're not really nuts. They're just taking advantage of the system because that's what the system values. But they inherently think it's bad. It is not so much that it's inherently bad. It's just so different from their value system. It's like when you go to another country and they eat that animal that you don't think you should be eating. But to them it's perfectly normal, but to you it's something radical and different, and you might put a value system on it saying it's good or bad.
That's so I like really like that analogy of the going to different countries and trying different like foods and stuff like that. Because so when I see people go from one game to another in terms of trying it out, um they always have a most likely they'll have a character that they're attached to that's similar to like their style that they've played before with as characters, and which is fine. Everything is cool and dandy about that. But sometimes so like for me, people used to lump me in the you love mix-ups. You play Magneto in the past, you play Eno in the past, so you must be a mix-up heavy guy. When really no. And it's funny that you and like my first game with Street Fighter 4 also being my first game next to Marvel 2. I also played like Dictator and Boxer a lot. Even when I went from pad to stick, I still stuck with those charge characters because I really love the fact that they can really they were just very heavy on footsies. They weren't too combo heavy, and so like when I move to when I see people move to other games, they and the mechanics are not really quite the same, and they try to play their style with a certain character, they get upset. Um, that's why like when Strive for is a good example. Um, the reason why I'm so optimistic still about the games because I'm for one I've never touched pot in Guilty Gear all my years of playing that game. And now I chose to pick him because even if they had like Eno or Johnny in the game already, most likely would have went to pot because I don't want to force myself to try to play the game how I used to play it, especially when it's being advertised to be quite different from past versions. So I tend to do that to a lot of games, and whenever I see people, like I said, branch out to other games, it it's almost like the character select doesn't like exist sometimes, because even when you do find a character, it's okay to go back and like select a different character and have either a pocket character or whatever. You don't even have to be that strong of a player. It's cool as long as that pocket character helps you out and helping you out understand the game even more. You can play them either in casuals or use it in specific matchups. And it's all about comfortability. Or even how you feel in the moment. You could be feeling, I don't feel like, because the way I see fighting games, it's like a menu, and I don't want to limit myself by trying the same menu over and over again. Now, when you branch out, you gotta make sure that you don't get confused with all you're playing too. So you do have to limit it to some degree. But yeah, I just see a lot of people make that mistake with traveling to other games.
Okay, I guess my point is because I heard what a lot of you saying. I relate to a good bit of it, but then I think about like the first thing that came to my mind is that guy who comes onto the Discord or Twitter. Could you tell me who the Chun Li of this game is? Without even really looking at the game. And it's
I
like they already know what
barely
they want.
touching
Yeah,
it.
but I guess that to you that is part of what builds you up is with the kind of characters you play. Because some people, I want the grappler, I want the big meaty grappler. Don't give me anything else. I don't care if it's not in the game. You won't see me playing it. And like you made that restaurant example. Like there's people like you who I gotta try everything on this menu. But then there's good old Joe who's been going to that diner every day after work since he started working at the plant 15 years ago, and he always orders the double decker burger with the strawberry shake from Patty. And that's what he wants. He don't want anything else on that menu, and there are people who like that. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a mistake. It's just how you're built and what it is you want. And so like when you like a certain character archetype, whether it be how they look or how they play, and then yeah, in some ways yeah that can limit you. But in other ways, you can kind of go in with a comfortability with what you want. So like, you just have to like, let me adjust it here, let me adjust it that. But I got the basic template of how I want to play, and I can build game plans off of this. And so like, I guess that concept is there too. But then you had like you, and then you remember when we had Fame on, he's like, yeah, I just picked a character that I like and think is cool, and then whatever style they give me, that's how it is. I just want to play something that I think is cool, and then you saw that game over game, he basically played a little bit of everything for the most part, and it gave him a lot of experience. And that sounds very similar to what you're talking about. Because I was one of those people. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, yeah, you're totally right. It's not a mistake. It's like the personality. So when I first got into fighting games, I guess the best way I could attribute it is I used to do acting in the past, so I love a lot of different personalities. And some people are different in that aspect. Some people might love they talk a lot of crap, so they always in your face. So they love picking those type of characters. You actually see that their personalities expressed in game. You know, oh, I love like the dark edgy type, so I'm gonna pick those type of characters. So I think that's pretty interesting.
I've
Um,
I've actually I've actually heard all kinds of reasons for people picking characters. Like I used to work at a construction plant. Now, this construction worker on the game, that's who I'm picking. It could be it could be anything, and then that guy might be the Evo champ, and then you find out why they picked the character. You're like, whoa, or so like they lost a bet when they were 15 and had to pick this character, and that's just who they played forever. So it could be anything, but yeah, I think that's what makes it all interesting because you don't know what motivates someone to get in there and to flesh things out, to build up their own game plans and ways of playing. Because it's like there's a bunch of different paths leading to the top. Because like while there's similarities, I've noticed that there are people who operate on like different logic, different motivations, and they still become champions. So there's not always like one straight path to becoming like the best if that's your goal. So I figure how you're built. How can I put this? I guess how you're built is like when you're playing somebody, you have to get to know them in a sense where like when they make decisions and stuff in game, you have to understand like they're not working off your logic. They're not working off what you think is right and wrong. They're operating off their own logic, and so sometimes they do things where they're just kind of off base completely in your mind, and you're getting hit by random stuff, or they're getting hit by something. You're like, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? So that's why I think fighting games are interesting because you have to connect on people who don't think the exact same way you do, but you still have to kind of make sense of what they're doing. If that kind of came out clear.
oh no, that makes sense. Like you see this a lot with new fighters, right? When you have the guy from the high flying like Marvel genre, and then you got the players from like more slower pace Street Fighter, and you got the players where it's like a little bit more in the middle, kind of like higher paced, but still kind of like footsies, KOF, and they're all join like one game, like a new fighter that comes out, and they all play each other. And that's the most exciting part for us as like fighting game fans, right? We get to see these players duke it out and see how they approach a game, and it's very, and you see it all the time. You see them, you see them express themselves and kind of bring some of that like mentality from the other game with their characters into that game, and it's so cool. In high level play, I would say like players to name a few that you see a lot do that is like Justin Wong, of course, because he can play any game. Uh, Reynolds, uh, he comes from KOF, and he when you see him approach another game, his play style is already like kind of crazy in KOF, but it's super read based heavy and very rewarding, and you see that in every other game he plays. Um, you could say the same for Tokido and Kaz, the way they approach different games. Kazunoko. Um, it's very fascinating to see them do that at such a high level too. Um, it's
Pretty
like their
cool.
styles change, but doesn't. You would think it'll be their flaw, which I guess in some cases it is at the highest level, but it's a hard flaw to call out. It's like all the lower play, like me and you, for example, we know Kazunoko will DP a lot, right? But if we played him now, how often will you call out his DPs?
Like that's kind of like how he's been built around. Like he knows when to, interrupt your pressure, when he's gonna disrespect, and I guess he has a sixth sense based on all the experience he has. And so, like you said, you can see that concept with him, and anything he picks up, where it's like, yeah, he's gonna swing out, and he's likely to hit you because that's how he's built.
Yeah, he understands those moments so well, and it's interesting. It's just so weird because there are players who've never played him before, and he does not have data on them whatsoever, and he'll probably mop them. But the players that he's playing against, like for us, for example, uh, he we know so much more about Kazunoko than he knows about us, and we'll still have like a hard time dealing with him. Of course, because of experience, but you have that game plan of, oh, where at least where that weakness lies in him, but it's yet still hard to call out. I guess that's like the mark of like great play.
Yeah, I mean, like the experience you pick up in those games, like they just only enhance you over time. But do you think that sometimes when you get into too many games that it may become baggage for you? Like you can't really be strong at one. You think something like that ever happens?
I think so. If you're trying to get too good at too many games, you said will it like pretty much hurt you in the long run?
You think there's a point in where if you spread yourself too thin, or if you don't take, if you never been to a enough level with a game, that it just becomes like a mismatch of stuff that you just none of them you excel at, and do you think that can hold you back in any kind of degree?
I think, and I'm probably going to get a lot of people that might disagree with me on this, but I think probably 95% of the community cannot play multiple games at a intermediate to higher level. Um, because even when you see like a strong player go from like let's say like KOF, so like a Marvel, they they just some concepts they don't understand when playing a game like that, and vice versa when a Marvel player goes to maybe like a KOF or Street Fighter or something. Some concepts they don't understand, and the reason why we have like those iconic names in FGC like the Kazunokos and the Justin Wongs is because they can transition to like any game and play them at such a high level, express themselves at such a high level, even if we know like some of their weaknesses. Um, Whereas in like lower, intermediate to lower level play, we once we have our weaknesses exposed, which is a little bit easier to do against each other. That's like that's a feat in itself. It's hard in itself. So it's like to do that on multiple games simultaneously. It's I don't see. I'm never through all my 10 years or 11 years, probably more than that in the FGC. I haven't seen an intermediate player do well with multiple games, like consistently top three in multiple games at majors, as like the names I just named, like the Kazunokos and the Tokitos and the Justin Wongs.
To me, like those guys you named, those are the exception to the rule. And generally, most people, if they just kind of dabble in a lot of stuff and they don't take one to like to the utmost limit, it's hard, and they don't get, I guess, like a solid identity. To me, I think if you can get to the very top of one thing, it's probably easier to do it yeah, do it after that with the next game to the next game to the next game. But if you never get to that point and you're just like kind of like getting to like halfway to one game and then halfway in another, then it feels like you just kind of become this incomplete kind of player. I think you kind of got to reach a really high point. Whether it doesn't have to be world class, like even high level, intermediate to like kind of advanced kind of play, and then that's when you can really start expressing yourself in other games. I feel because you start seeing the nitty gritty, the good and the bad, how to fight out of bad situations, how to make the most of what you got, whether it's a lot or a little. And once you can really do all of that in one single game or even two, however many, that's when you can start kind of spreading yourself out and becoming like really strong in other games pretty quickly. But if you don't have that ability to like that experience of like being able to fight through any situation, good or bad, then it's hard to make that happen anywhere else. Which is why I think that's why that list you have is really small, because enough people don't really know how to fight through it to get to that point.
Yeah, it's it at the bare bones of it. It's having your fundamentals and understanding the fundamentals of the game. Once you can do that, you can play at a high level. You can play any character and just understand, not necessarily understand the character fully, but you can still, I would say, I don't want to say get by because you still probably put in work with the character, but it's just those fundamentals of like the mechanics of the game, some of the fundamentals of the character, and some of the fundamentals of you just from your past fighting games, uh, uh, together, so that way you can like it like go on, and it's really like I said, it's really hard to do for intermediate to lower players because those are the type of players that are still trying to find themselves. I would say, and it's yeah, it's that's another topic in itself, trying to find yourself as a game as a fighting game player. Or I guess
Yeah.
that is part of this,
Yeah,
right?
it is. I feel like it is part of this, but like if you really want to flesh it out and dig deep into finding your identity, that in itself can be like a overall discussion. But the broad strokes, yeah, I definitely think it fits in like the DNA of who you are. What it is you
Right.
like to do, and it kind of it's not always like technical stuff too, because it's like, what is it that makes you mad? What is it that gets you excited? Those things can affect how you do in any particular game. And so like when you play a game where you can't get hit for like 80% of your life, and that's what keeps you calm. But when it happens in another game, it makes you mad and you become unfocused. Then that's another thing that you kind of take with you that's built into you, and that you gotta kind of either fight against or make it work for you some way, or just not play that game.
Oh yeah, that a lot in a lot of cases can beat you before your opponent can. Because if I was to go and play, let's say Gear is a good example. Um, Everybody, there's a joke where it's like you love your character but you hate every other character, and then there's like bad matchups, right? where like it seems impossible to win, and you're already telling yourself, well, I can't win this matchup because it's bad, and right off the bat, that's like the bad negative way of looking at it. Or it could be something simple like, oh, I hate the way this player does this combo. Now you're thinking too much about how they're doing a combo, you know? And I always tell people to like make sure they like really find a character that they love, with a game that they love. Because if you get hit, especially like in a game that you love, no, all the hits. You ever play like a strong player, or not even necessarily a strong player, just a person who just loved the game, and they'll get hit, and they'll just be making the sounds, or they'll be like into it. It's because like they really love in the game. They're not really focusing too much on the wins and the losses. At that point, they're loving the expression of the game and how the opponent expressing themselves with it too.
You mean that bad word? FUN? That bad word?
Oh man, you said it, I didn't.
I mean, you actually brought up something that's actually really funny because it's something we talked about it kind of here and there throughout the show. But man, if you don't have like say good self-esteem, a good view of yourself, it is really really hard to be good at fighting games because you're gonna be roped along by results. Like sometimes you're gonna win and you're gonna be on a high like a drug, and it's gonna like egg you on, then you start losing, and then it just drops you down to rock bottom, and then you just feel like my worth as a person isn't there because so and so woke up with a DP and I lost or whatever. And so like if you don't have like good self-esteem and just like a healthy view of yourself, fighting games are way harder than they actually have to be because if you can't accept that the objective thing happened and you lost and it's not a reflection of your character, your state of being, and then just move on to the next thing, is so hard. It's so hard because you just come away feeling worse and worse, and then you get in a rage mode, and then that's when you kind of fall off. So like even like your personality traits, like you said that earlier, like they factor in so much to how you can enjoy any fighting game, maybe a particular one, maybe the genre.
Yeah, man. Like if somebody's not letting you play the game, like they're pretty much shutting you out, and that can be a bad feeling. But you can't really, and it's like that's when fighting games parallel with life, right? Like some people might disrespect you in your plus frames, and now you're like, oh man, you don't care about what I'm doing. Like you don't care. Now you're ignoring the interaction with me, and that could kind of like hurt people in ways. But that's why you always also have to have like those small goals, right? Multiple small goals. Don't just have like one, because that can really like put a damper on you if you just have one. But like yeah, if you just have multiple small goals in fighting games, um, and just go for them, you'll see where that flicker, like that little light of happiness, will come from. As corny as that sounds, it'll come out of nowhere, and then that you can like that will slowly grow into like a flame, and next thing you know, you're shining like the sun because now you're like having fun, and next thing you know, whoa, I just won a game, and that's the icing on the cake right there. Like that's the extra stuff. Like whoa, the bonus, I won a game. Like yeah, I was having fun doing all this stuff, well, and I was losing, but now I won, and so it's kind of like what you said. I think you said Dogi said this, where it's like you're playing in a tournament and you're so focused on like just staying fun in it, keep in that aspect of it, and next thing you know you're like in grand finals, and next thing you know you're the only one left.
Yeah, basically like you just go there, you have fun, don't worry about winning and losing, and then one day, you're the last one left. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that same concept plays even without the tournament. If you can just keep that concept going, uh, just in general when you're going like the locals for casuals and everything like that, you'll find out just how much you'll be able to like the game, and most importantly, just how much you'll be able to listen to people if you make a mistake.
Yeah, I can definitely see that because like the more you just like enjoy the game itself, the less of a chore it becomes first and foremost. And so like when you need that extra energy that you always have it when you need to go into training mode to fix something, or when somebody's like giving you advice, instead of chomping back at them because you should have won or whatever, you're able to take it with some grace. It might hurt your pride a little bit. We all got egos, but yeah, I think kind of sort of staying on a similar track but switching gears somewhat. Being able to just be open minded, something you mentioned several times, I think is really important. And it was hard for me at first. Like I just had to like really get into playing other games, and I think the game that really just broke me out of my mold of Street Fighter was Arcana Heart because Dogi was really into it, and then everyone around us was playing it at the time, and I was like, I kept trying to figure out how to anti-air people. I kept trying to everything I approached the game with was from the Street Fighter point of view, and it didn't work. And like you got to be in the air, you got to be moving around like a nut, quote unquote, and you got to be doing like you got to be engaged with the space that you're occupying and what your space your opponent's trying to occupy. That's the basis of the game. And so like I didn't get that at first because I just wanted to anti-air because that's what you're supposed to do when somebody's jumping at you. I just wanted to hit confirm like this because that's what you're supposed to do. But in reality, how you hit confirm, how you get around the characters jumping at you is you move in a place where they're not going to be, or you try to come from above them because most characters in the game couldn't like directly attack above them. So like being above them was an advantage because it was a movement based positional game. And so like it broke the mold of fighters for me entirely because even to this day I think it's still one of the most unique 2D games there is because it doesn't really follow the Street Fighter mold to any real degree like Guilty Gear and KOF and stuff to do. So that's when I had to just like step back and then pull back and start thinking more abstract. Like, okay, somebody does this. This is how I want to react. Instead of jump at me anti-air. I think what do they want to do and how do I want to react in regards to that to get what I want. And then I started taking that to other games. So when I had to transition to 3D, which is a Virtua Fighter, because we have a diehard Virtua Fighter guy, Blackstar here in the middle of Georgia where I live, and he's the one who put me on that game. So I was like, that was a real hard transition. Like we could talk about DNA as far as like whether you started from 3D games to 2D games because your mindset coming from either one of those are very different. Because like you ask any Tekken player to play a 2D game, it's like rocket science and vice versa.
Yeah, I've never really played Tekken competitively, but I've on multiple occasions talked to different people who went from 2D to Tekken, and I hear a big sigh before they have that conversation because for one, they're like, I still don't get it, man. I don't understand. But two, one thing I'd come out of the conversation with is they actually still, learn something. They progress at something. They may not be the best like overnight, but they still took each and every day. The more they kept playing the game, they learned something new. And I feel like honestly, it's the same thing with 2D fighters. If you're still playing, if you played a 2D fighter, or same thing for Tekken, if you haven't branched out to another game, if you're sticking with that game, it's okay to like try to find something new and everything like that. And it's okay to embrace stuff, you know. It may be hard because it's funny you say you used the word nut, and I thought it was funny that you said that because some people might be like, "Wow, he's flying around like a nut," and other people might think, "Well, like that's the most graceful way to play that game." Like there, like if I was like I was watching somebody play DBFZ earlier, and somebody was playing Zamas, and they kept going in fly mode, and the guy was getting upset because he's like, he's just gonna fly away. I have the life lead. I don't understand why he's doing that. It's like, well, he's more comfortable, and he's just trying to assess the situation. So, like, you may say he's playing lame, but he's seeing that, and it's like, well, I'm just being more, making sure everything. I'm slowing down the game, you know.
Feel you on that. And it's like I think you're kind of dead on where it's like you gotta dig your heels deep, and it's like if I want to understand this, I gotta be extremely frustrated by it because frustration usually means you got something to learn. It might just mean it's like legitimately bad, of course, but usually like when you feel it in certain ways, you're like, yeah, this means I gotta learn this, I gotta learn this, I gotta learn this, and eventually you wrap your mind around it through time and understanding, being open minded and embracing it. So like going from 2D to 3D and vice versa, it definitely takes sitting down and being like, okay, I don't understand this. This looks like This is like a foreign language, someone speaking to me, even though we're talking about the same thing. We're having a conversation about the same thing, but they changed the language on me. I understand 2D, I speak that fluently, but we're talking about frame traps and spacing and all that stuff. But now you're telling me in a different language. That's to me, that's how 2D to 3D was. That's how it felt. And even now, I don't claim to understand it very well, but I have a much better understanding when I first started it, where it's like Z-axis. What is that? Why I need to step? And
Yeah, man.
eventually, yeah, you kind of understand all that stuff. You learn to build game plans, and then you start seeing the bigger picture, where it's like there's a core to where a lot of these games are ultimately the same. It's just the way they look, the way you got to build up strategy within them are ultimately different. But if you see these similarities, you can get to where you want much faster. I feel.
Man, I'm glad you said that because from it's all about accepting, like embracing what you're frustrated at or what you just learned. And that is the hardest part, in my opinion, of fighting, learning, and fighting games. Because in the moment, somebody's telling you this is different. No, when you've been like, it's kind of like you're going to this, you're taking a shower. It's like, hey, cool, I'm about to take a shower, and then somebody walks in there and like, no, you don't do it that way. You do it this way. And you're like, wait, well, what? Like, that's not how I take my showers or whatever. What? I don't like I wipe my ass with my soap this way. But anyway, like when you a good example is like from Street Fighter to like Guilty Gear, right? Like simple thing you gotta learn to anti-air. And I think Machabo made an article about this. Like even though Guilty Gear is different than like the average 2D fighters like Street Fighter, there's still the heavy fundamentals that's there that you need to learn that can help you out. So like in Street Fighter, the first rule is like be ready. You don't really jump because you can be ready for the anti-air. If you think about it, it when you go to Guilty Gear and you're new to it, you're like, wow, like don't jump or I'm gonna anti-air you. And the air dash, you're like, wait a minute, whoa, that case still applies. You just have to break down the game a little bit more fundamentally, and like it's different. But that case still can apply. There's still anti-airs. Same thing uh for like your Marvel games. Like you can still anti-air. It's scary to come down in that game because they can left right mix you up before you come down. And like you're not it the same situation where it's like you're not in full control if you're in the air. You don't and it's that uncomfortability when you're in that situation a lot of times. So yeah, it's and I could kind of see how that fundamentally can break somebody going to a 3D fighter because it's like, well, we don't jump in 3D fighters. First of all, there's no real jumping in there. But I'm pretty sure there's a something that goes from one 3D fighter to another where it seems different, but the fundamentals on how to like apply it are still there. One case I see this with is sidestepping. You know, that's the is sidestepping, and I guess in Tekken is different than maybe a Virtual Fighter, right?
Like in Virtua Fighter, it's a full commitment. While in Tekken, you can generally, as far as I understand, you can like cancel out of it at a certain point. But in Virtua Fighter, you have to commit to at least to some of it. So like if you do an empty step in Virtua Fighter, you basically asking
Hmm.
to get hit. So
Oh,
it is kind of the equivalent of jumping in a 2D game, as far as like I would see it.
right. And you still have your punishes for it. You can still have your callouts for it. So there's not too much that somebody can do out of the realm of the fighting game that they're playing, especially when that like especially if you're like going from the same like field, the same sort of genre, like you said, a 3D fighter to another 3D fighter or a 2D fighter. But it's when you go from that 2D to 3D, that's where like like you said, that's where people will have like the biggest struggle. But if you can just break down fundamentally where to start, then you're gonna see that all right, 3D fighters in a way, because you understand 3D fighters good enough to say, wow, sidestepping is almost like jumping. So that already is like a great feat in itself, fundamentally, to understand that situation. So like understanding how to approach different fighting games and express yourself. Um, like I said in the beginning, it can be hard if somebody gets you out of your element, but it's still you can still apply your game as long as you accept learn to accept their game, how they're trying to play. You know.
Definitely, like just sometimes the answer is like this ain't for me. I'm walking away. But like if it's a matter of I don't understand this, I don't understand why this game rewards this, and it looks kind of fun, but I just can't understand this. And the thing that really helped me to start getting from fighting game to fighting game is turn it into questions. Like when you get in the game and somebody's jumping at you, you go, okay, how do I stop this? And then you find your anti-air and then it works. Then you find another character that does a jump in and it beats your anti-air. Okay, how do I stop this? You constantly ask questions. Don't and make them as specific as possible. Like even like this is for people who go into discords, and this usually even for yourself. For me, uh, I hit somebody. I'm always hitting somebody with this button. What can I do next? Is it a combo? Do I get frame advantage? Do I get positioning? And then you apply that. If they hit me with this or they make me block this, what are my options? And then that's what you take into training mode. Like a lot of people who get started, they don't know how to use training mode, and that's another big thing. And the thing is, that's why people struggle from game to game because they only know how to think strictly in their game and not how to just ask questions about what's happening. So like the better you get at being able to ask questions about what you see and what you experience, the easier it is, I think, is to transition from any fighting game or anything competitive really. It's like you go, why is this person doing this? And then why is this person doing this? Turns into okay, they did this, and so they know their options are this. So why would they choose these options? Because what are they trying to beat? And the more you ask those questions, the better your understanding becomes of what's happening, and the better you can learn to improve yourself when you ask questions about your own character and your own actions. And then that transcends fighting games period because you can ask those questions about yourself like why do I always get hit by the wake up DP? Oh, I'm not doing safe jumps, so I need to learn some safe jumps. The more questions you ask, the less mystery there is, and those questions can carry you in any fighting game. And sometimes you got to change the question for a fighting game, but that's critical thinking, right? Look at what's happening, ask questions.
Yeah, I can't remember if a dev said this for a fighting game or a top player said this, but they said there's always an answer to a situation to a situation in fighting games. There's always an answer. There may not be a clean way to beat it, maybe very hard. You may just simply not know it, but there's always an answer, you know, to to fighting games.
Yeah, sometimes the
So,
answer is kind of dirty and not the one you want to hear, unfortunately.
mhm.
And sometimes, like, the answer is like, you got to avoid that situation entirely. So you need to rewind back to the choices you made before. And that's something a lot of people have a hard time taking in as well.
Man, that just Justin Wong when somebody asked him in one interview, how do you block so well in like Marvel games? He said it's not necessarily him blocking. He's minimizing his opponent's offense by not putting himself in situation, or he's exhausting their resources. So by the time they are in that situation, he is in that situation. They can only go for like a minimum amount of mix-ups and stuff. And I was like, wow, like ever since I was like that's so cool because that you're taking you're saying a person can have anything in their arsenal. They can have unblockable setups all day. They can have like high lows, like all this grimy stuff, and have this powerful character. And you cannot deal with it if you just get out of if you're not even be in the situation, not even approach it. And that can frustrate them as a player because now they're not getting their game plan. Oh, I was like, now I see why you were so good at Marvel too for so many years.
Hey man, if you ain't there, they can't do nothing to you, right?
Yeah, man.
Like you got like when you put the focus on like you got to put me in this situation, and it becomes that's when you're playing a whole different game. Because most people, their first instinct is like, how do I get out of this mix up? There's it's never how do I avoid this mix up. Like almost never when you see intermediate to lower players. When you're on a Discord, they go, "Oh man, this character did X, and I'm so sick of it." They never go, "Okay, what can I do to stay out of the range of X?" They just go, "X has happened. I want out." And it's like I gotta. And my this is my explanation. This is usually what I say. I'm like, look, when you play, let's say Guilty Gear. When you play a game like Guilty Gear, there's certain things that the characters are allowed to have. Like when Potemkin knocks you down, he gets the safe jump you to death because you let him have the knockdown. You don't get to take away his power from knocking you down. Your power is keep him in a position where it is incredibly difficult to knock you down. That's where you gotta apply your power because you are a ranged character or you're a character with a lot of movement. But once he gets what he wants, which is the knockdown, he's gonna safe jump you, empty jump low, empty jump, pot buster. That's where his power is allowed to be, and you can't say, you know what, I want out of this because he's allowed to have it. And that's one of the things that I think is really hard for like a lot of players to swallow. Is like, yeah, there are certain situations where this character's just allowed to have this. Milia knocks you down in the corner. She sets up her disc, puts the YRC. She's allowed to put the mix up on you. You're guessing. You put her in a position of power. When you made the choices that got you put there, and that's the one thing you got to understand. And then when you think about that, you go, okay, there's a good thing about that. There's a good thing about that in that there's a point where I can apply my power. And if my power is, okay, you can't come near me or I can control this part of the screen, that's where you leverage that. And so when you ask those questions, rather than saying, how do I take away this character's power, you might go, how do I get away from this character? How do I minimize this character's effect on me when they're in a powerful situation? I think that is the most valid question. But then the better question to ask is, how do I put this in it? How do I make it so that this character can't put me in this position, or at least that they have to work hard and spend health, resources, and they might have to give up certain parts of their strategy to get me into this part in this situation. Once you can start thinking like that, that's when the doors start opening up. That's when your brain starts, giving those funny feelings where you can start thinking about things in all kinds of different ways. Where you come up with answers that, like you said, aren't always straightforward. They may be roundabout, but then they may be incredibly effective. Like just, backdashing when you see them move in a certain way, and then when they come down with a button, they just whiff in the air and they're just sitting in front of you whiff. That can be incredibly frustrating to the opponent when they can't hit you for the small things like that, but you don't think of them as straightforward answers to a question you had.
Yeah, they take you out of your element, and it, like you say, it can be frustrating, but it's I that's why characters like bad matchups, like for instance, like you just said, Potemkin, um, that's why they have those bad matchups, like the keep away characters. But you don't necessarily have to pick those characters to beat Potemkin, right? You can just take advantage of what your character can do to keep him out, and you take those advantages. It's all
That's a,
about taking. That's when you take account to like the I guess the playing more safe gameplay, right? If you're not going to play safe, you're going to suffer the consequences, and like against a character like Potemkin.
Everybody gets a chance to exercise their power if they make the right decisions. And
Yeah.
if you make the wrong decisions, then your decision tree has been limited by your opponent, assuming they run their pressure and whatever else they're oki, correctly. That they've earned it at that point. Now, whether you think the game should reward it or not, that's something that you need to take up with the devs. It's an entirely different discussion. But at the point is, the game is happening, and they're allowed to have X, Y, and Z. And at best, you might be able to minimize it and maybe escape if you can, but the risk is on you. And that's when you got to accept that those characters get certain things, and your character gets certain things, and their character's not allowed to take away your power in those certain situations. Now, there's certain games where that dynamic might be messed up, but generally, if you think of games that way, I think it's a lot easier. At least that is for me.
uh, where was it? I think it was Snake Eyes interview. Uh, it was a good. It was this is like an old Street Fighter 4 interview, but Snake Eyes talked about how I think it was Mark Teddy, the guy player, didn't like fighting. What was it? Zangief because Zangief pretty much played forced him to play differently. So he thought that was like cheap about Zangief or something like that. And I always thought that was pretty funny. How like just the character just existing in with their archetype just can force you to like think different. Now you automatically don't like that character because you're forced to play the game differently.
Man, I've seen that so many times. Like I can keep going to the Faust Discord because that's like my source of this. Because their big thing is Axel. You can't sit there and press your buttons like usually. You can't sit there and throw items because he'll just like poke you out with normals and rinsing and whatever. You have to literally play in a way that's so counterintuitive what you did, but you can still do very many. You can there's a lot of effective things you can still do. There's just not the basic things that you're always so used to doing. And so like just the concept is like I can't do what I can do normally. I hate this. And sometimes that means you got a bad matchup, but sometimes it just means you gotta play differently. Like it could be either or. It's just that concept you mentioned is really funny because I see it so much.
Yeah, I think Mark Teddy at one. I think he said, don't quote me on this, but I think he was like Zangief is like the best or something like that because or I can't win against Mark Teddy against Snake Eyes because he plays Zangief. I just thought that was pretty just crazy, but yeah, this it's funny how like that happens when like a character puts you out of your element and you're like now ever since day one when you selected that character, everything's thrown out the window because this character is forcing you to play different and not play your game plan. I find it quite fascinating. I'm always pretty like having pretty fun with those situations because now, like my game plan is like, all right, now I want to take you out of your element. I want to do something to force you to be like, whoa, like he can do that in this matchup. Okay, like that's actually pretty scary. Whatever. So, little
That's
things like that. Like I said, having small goals, man.
yeah, yeah.
Necessarily don't have to get the win. You know.
That's definitely a good way to think about it. Like it's like there's a lot. How can I put you in a messed up situation? It's like in the end, isn't it just a way to expand your knowledge of the character and what they can do? And and you just figured out, hey, this isn't their only game plan. Expand your mind. Always an opportunity to learn.
Yep. Like whenever I went against an Axel player, I was always confident against them because I would have a small goal with any character I play. And I play Eno, which is like 7-3 matchup for like most people say, but it felt like it was like 5-5 because I would have like small goals and I slowly build up. Whereas, and you could say, yeah, it's just to get the knockdown and run it. And it's like, no, it's actually something small like staying out of range of his normal. So that way he can like kind of do something, kind of jump or get close, kind of take him out of that, just spacing it alone, kind of takes the Axel player out of their element. So I'm like, all right, cool, I took you out of your element. Now I can kind of play my game.
Yeah, the solution's not always straightforward, but if you think there's one there, and you can take advantage of it, like making somebody do something differently than they usually would, that might be what you need. Well,
Yeah.
man, so like we talked about a lot. Like I started this out with like what games did you play, what took you, and where they took you, and what type of player you are, and all that kind of like. I tried to emphasize as many things as I can as your quote unquote DNA, fighting game DNA. And I think there's a lot of things you can include in that, and a lot of things that bring us to where we are. One thing I didn't really touch on, and I feel like I don't want to spend too much time on, but like yeah, your community is one thing too. Like the type of players, the level of players, if they're helpful, if they're like terrible people, etc. That can build a lot into what type of games you want to play, and how you look at each community as you keep going from game to game.
Oh no, I was gonna mention something like that earlier. Like when I went to 404 right before this whole pandemic thing started. That was my first time there, and I had like a couple matches in DBFZ. And the best part about being there was being able to talk to people and telling them what I did wrong and what they did wrong. That was like my favorite part of being there. And now I don't have that right now, but it was that plays a like just like you said, it's just as big as like from like what games you came back. It's like your community helps build character.
Yep, yep. So like, I guess man, I think we hit all the big points and we had a pretty good discussion. The only thing that I really got to say is it's like kind of emphasizing what I said before. Ask questions. Really think about the games you come from. Don't let the games you started with be your shackles. Let them be the things that you know let you bring something new to other people who are playing a different game as the same one you're engaging in. Let it be something that boosts you and bring you up.
Yeah, man. I just yeah. For me, I would say if I would have to tell everybody is embrace, accept what's going on in the game. What happened to you, what didn't happen correctly. Like just embrace it because if you can do that, you can move on. Cause isn't it funny when a game is new and you're like, wow, that works, and then you're like, wow, that's BS, and then maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe a year later, people will actually have a good answer to it, and you're like, whoa, well, I was kind of too quick on my thinking, I guess. And it usually actually happens within a week. Like people will find something that will be able to like deal with something. So like accept like embrace whatever you that you have in front of you, because that way you can move on and move on to the next thing and progress. And that's what you want to do as a player, right?
Word,
And in
man.
life.
Yeah. Life ain't always easy, and it's not always gonna give us the W. But even when we lose, we still got to take something from it and keep it going.
Yep.
But man, I feel like this has been a pretty good discussion. So like sit down, and think about where you came from and where you're going, and hopefully the next game you pick up is a really great journey.
Yep.
So
And yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
same here. So thank you guys for chilling with us week after week. If you like what you see, hit that like button, follow Casey and I on Twitter, all that good stuff, and we'll try to keep the episodes rolling. But I really enjoy sitting down and having these discussions with Casey. Like I always, you know, come in here with things I want to say, but I always come away with things I learned. So I hope that's true for all of you as well. And keep tuning in.
Likewise, man. Thank you everybody for watching, man. Just whoever, all the loyal people, all the new people, just love you all, man. And stay safe out there.
Yep. And again, if you have any feedback, suggestions, go ahead, hit us up on Twitter, put them in the comments, anything else. But I don't got anything else, so I'm going to say peace out.
Yep, that's it. Peace.